everyone, it's Nichol Spohr here today for Simon Says Stamp with a one-layer masking card featuring stamps from the Simon Says Stamp September 2021 card kit called Sunshine Flowers. We are going to be using the Sunshine Flowers stamp set for our card today. Right now I am figuring out my placement for the jarred floral image, the leaves, and also a single flower bud there. And then I will kind of stamp everything, starting with whatever will be in the foreground, masking that, and then stamping the next image, masking, etc. I'm also going to be using this great border image from the Simon Says Stamp On the Ground stamp set. I know it says on the ground and it's got some grass and like a little stone, like sidewalk, I guess I want to say, and other sort of ground images. I'm actually going to be using kind of the tiled looking border to create a countertop that this jar of flowers is sitting on, and then we're going to use a stencil to give some subway tile looking background. I decided I thought the best kind of placement or way to organize this would be a landscape style card. The base of the card is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock so that I can do a little no line coloring with Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I stamped the flower first using Fawn Jellyfish ink. This is a great ink for no line coloring. And then I stamped the image again on Simon Says Stamp masking paper, and then I trimmed out that flower, and I'm going to place it right over the flower image on my panel. Now I'm going to lay out my images again, and the next image is going to be our largest image, which is that jar of pretty flowers. So I'm going to figure out exactly where I want that to go, line that up, and we're going to stamp that with the Jellyfish no line coloring ink. Then we will stamp it again on some masking paper. Now the one thing that I did is I didn't fussy cut this entire mask. You don't really need to. Now if you want a little bit easier time creating the bricked or subway tile background, it's a brick stencil, but I'm using it as tile. You could cut out the whole thing and mask the entire image and probably do the brick background first. If I had this to do over, I probably wouldn't have done that. I would have done this whole thing exactly like I'm doing it now, but I would have stenciled the background first before coloring in the image because it is very light colors. As it is, you can do it either way, which you're going to see here in the video. I'm only creating my mask in the bottom part where I need that on the ground border to go. So we have that image. Then we have the little leaf or branch image that I want to look like it's kind of tucked back behind our jar of flowers. And so I'm going to lay that next. Now I accidentally laid it on that cling stamp, and you can see it pulled up some of the lines from that stamp. A little stamp cleaner and a microfiber cloth got those lines off of the stamp. I just wanted to note that because that was an accident that happened. I didn't realize I laid it there, and the stickiness from the clear stamp picked those lines on the cling stamp up. So I stamped the branch next. This was by far the most time-consuming mask to create. Again, I actually didn't have to do all of the leaves. I just did the portion that is going to fall below or where my countertop is going to be. I'm going to place my cling stamp then in my MISTI, ink that up too with the Fawn Jellyfish no line coloring ink, and stamp my countertop. Then I can easily remove all of my masks and start coloring. I find it easiest to use some nice craft tweezers to lift up my masks and move them out of the way. I'm actually using a piece of the backing paper from the largest mask so that I can hold on to these in case I need them again. That way I don't have to stamp and fussy cut extra masks. I ended up not needing to, but there's always those times that something happens, and so it's handy to have them right there, easy to reuse, or even if you want to create more than one card at a time. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and we are going to start coloring in our images. I have listed the marker colors I'm using across the top of the screen. Starting with the sunflower looking image, I'm using mustard and pale yellow, for the petals on my sunflower, and then the center of the sunflower will be deep brown, brown, and light brown combinations of those three colors. The very center is going to be deep brown, and then the outer ring is brown and light brown, which you'll see here in a minute. Now, this is a pretty detailed floral image, and I noticed as I worked on coloring and got some more of the images colored in that there were parts that, like, I missed some of the sunflower petals. So I just went back and colored those in later, which you will see throughout the coloring of the image. I'm using a couple of different color combinations for the greenery on my card as well, and trying to implement lots and lots of color for a very bright card. This green color combination is mid green and olive green. And again, this is another one where I noticed missing a few like little stems and leaves. So we will come back and revisit those as needed. My other green color combination is deep green and pale green. This one is used quite a bit for kind of that leafy branch. So not only this one coming out of the jar, but also the one lying on the ground back behind that jar. And we'll just color in these. I'm going to finish the florals coming out of the jar first, and then we will work on the jar and then move towards the countertop and the rest of the images. Because the countertop is a black and white tile look, and anything that is white is going to require a very light color of marker, and then the blender is what I ended up using. I don't want to use anything too dark that if I accidentally touch the blender to that color, it pulls the color out into other areas. So you'll notice that as I work on the countertop, I will kind of gradually finish anything that's hanging off into the counter or any of those white areas. The red color combination I'm using here for this flower is carmine and light carmine. I outlined the parts of the image with carmine first and then blended out with light carmine. And then I did go back in and add some detail as needed or extra dark places for some of the flowers. And then I noticed some greenery, so I'm just going to go ahead and add that really quick. Again, the more olive color combination is mid green and olive green. Then I did do a little turquoisey branch coming up out of the top there. It probably could be a floral too if you wanted. I just did kind of some leaves and with a turquoise green and green shadow. I liked that little pop of a different color combination. And then this little bud flower up here is going to be peach pink and sugared almond pink. I will use this same color combination for the flower lying down on the countertop. For the orange flower, we are going to use orange and pale orange. And I'm working kind of slow and referencing my stamp set a lot to make sure that I am coloring in the correct areas. Sometimes it can be a little tricky with no line coloring, or even with a detailed image like this, if you stamp it in black, it can be a little tricky to know where you are. And I went back in with my darker marker after blending out to add in a little bit more detail. I generally will kind of outline the image with my darker color, and then I blend that and pull some of that dark color out into the other areas with the lighter shade. For the yellow flower, we're using bright yellow and yellow. And I want to be careful next to the red flower that I don't touch it too much with a lighter yellow marker and pull that color out. And here's where I noticed some of the sunflower petals that I missed. I did feel that I needed to go back in with my bright yellow marker and add in more detail, as I didn't think that the shading was quite as much as I wanted it to be. It ended up being a little too much of the yellow marker and not as much of the bright yellow. So I'm just going to go back in and pretty much on every petal add in some little flicking marks and then blend out with the yellow as needed. The jar is cobalt blue, light blue, and a blender, and that's going to be the majority of the jar. The label across the front is going to be a different couple of color combinations. But we're going to start with cobalt blue and light blue. So I'm going to kind of outline it all with my cobalt blue, blend out with a little bit of the light blue, and then the blender. This is the biggest surface area to color. And I wanted my jar to be kind of like a blue ball glass jar, little mason jar is kind of what I was imagining here. I also think it would have been really pretty maybe in that turquoise color combination that I used for that little leaf image up at the top. So that would be turquoise green and green shadow, which I think would have been really pretty as well. Oh. Once I have this blended out, you can always go back in and add in some detail as needed in a few places. The outside of the label, I opted to trace with the blue marker, and I'll blend out with cobalt blue or light blue, either one, to just give it a little bit more of a defined edge and a little bit deeper, darker blue than the jar. And then the inside of the label I'm going to do in yellow. Now I started with yellow and pale yellow, and it was not quite the color combination that I wanted. I thought it was a little too light. It needed some more definition. So I will take a little bright yellow around the edges in a minute to define those a bit. We're going to move on to the countertop here, and I am going to do a checkerboard type of look with the following colors. So the dark color combination is gray brown, platinum brown, and gray tint, all three. The lighter, the white tiles, are gray tint and a blender. So I kind of trace out the white areas with gray tint, and then I blend it out with a blender. This gives it much more depth and dimension while still giving the appearance of being black and white tile. I could have left the card as is, but I think you'll notice as I finish coloring in the stamped images that the wall back behind everything would be really kind of blah and boring without some sort of embellishment. And that's why I opted to use a stencil to kind of help give me a more defined bricked area. You could also hand draw them in if you wanted to. Or in my, I call it brick because the stencil is brick, but I wanted it to look like subway tile. As I start moving across my countertop here, I will add in the greenery for the branch and my flower. I'm just working slow so that I make sure and keep my pattern consistent and don't accidentally color two dark squares or two white squares next to each other. I also want to make sure that I color anything that is back behind the leaves in the flower that is still the countertop. Now that we have the countertop area here colored, I can go ahead and finish all of these leaves. This is deep green and pale green again. It's very similar to the branch hanging out of the jar. And then there is a little tip of a leaf that I it's peeking out from behind the jar, and it's easy to see now, but when I was coloring it, I didn't. And I think I colored it near the end of finishing up my card front. So let's finish off our little tile here. I really tried to just do 1 or 2 at a time to help me kind of maintain the pattern. We have just a few of these left, and then we are going to color in the banner around the jar and the flower. So one of the great things about this Sunshine Flowers image with that banner is there are a couple of different sentiments in the Sunshine Flowers stamp set you can use to customize this. I am going to color it, and then we're going to stamp and emboss our sentiment right on top after the ink has completely dried. Here's that bright yellow marker that I was talking about in the yellow section of my jar that I think really kind of helps make that label a little bit prettier to look at. There's that little tip of that green leaf I noticed. And then I'm using carmine and light carmine for the banner. I want to pull in more of that red to kind of balance everything out. I like the bright color here. Where the banner wraps around the jar, I did take, I believe, the platinum brown marker and add some more definition, as I felt like it blended out a little too much with my red markers, but I'm going to wait a minute before doing that. The final image in our design we have to color is the pink flower, which is peach pink and sugared almond pink, just like the little bud up above. This stamp set has lots of great sentiments in it as well. Over there to the right of the jar is the perfect spot to stamp some extra sentiment. That actually is going to be kind of the main sentiment of the card, but I wanted my banner on the jar to kind of represent the design as well. Now I want to finish creating the entire card front before adding my sentiments. This is the Lawn Fawn brick stencil. I am using gray tint in a blender, and it's very messy and very quick. I use the stencil as a guide to kind of lay down the gray tint, and then I take the blender and blend that out. Really, it's just kind of the hint, the illusion of the brick in the background of my card. And I definitely need a new blender. It probably would have made this a little faster, but I was not looking for perfection here. I was just looking to add interest to this kitchen counter type of image. And I worked kind of slow. I would work in rows and in sections, and I started at the bottom and worked my way up. Now there are a few places along the edges of the background of this design that I didn't feel like had enough brick. I actually just hand drew in some lines and blended them out. But we'll do that when we remove the stencil. And there you can see I picked it up, and you can kind of get an idea of how awesome this is going to look. I was really happy with this background, as I felt that it was the perfect finishing touch to this scene card. One layer cards are amazing because they are so easy to mail, but I love to find ways to give lots of depth and dimension to a one layer card so that even though it is one layer, it looks dimensional. Stencils and masking are two great ways to achieve that effect. Okay, let's take our stencil away and look at that. So I noticed a couple spots that I felt like were missing. So we're just gonna draw in some little lines. It doesn't have to be too super perfect, but I love how that subway tile or brick background looks. Here is that platinum brown marker where I am just adding some definition to my banner, which definitely gives that more depth and dimension and looks so much better. And then I'm going to add some little circle designs to the center of my sunflower to also give that a little more dimension. Now you want to make sure that your ink is completely dry before you stamp and emboss. And because these are water-based inks, it can take a little bit, but it really should be dry about this point. I do recommend using a powder tool to help keep the ink right on the embossed area only. I stamped the thank you for all your sunshine sentiment, which looks like little labels right there to the right of my image against that subway tile background or brick background. I'm going to use VersaFine ONYX black ink to stamp that, and I used the Misty so I could stamp it more than once to get a very defined image. Another idea, if you're looking to do something that maybe isn't all one layer, is to stamp this on another piece of cardstock and trim it into strips that you can then pop up with foam adhesive. I think that would be a really cute look as well. I'm going to go ahead and clean that image and put it away before I stamp thank you. I don't want to accidentally maybe shift the cardstock or something and smudge that. Here is that powder tool that I was talking about using for the stamping and embossing. I'm going to stamp thank you right there on the banner. I love that thank you and miss you, the two sentiments that are made to work with this banner, just follow the natural line of it. I think that's amazing. You can see that some embossing powder stuck to a couple areas. I used a paintbrush to pick those up and remove them before heat embossing with white embossing powder. I'm making sure my heat tool is good and warm before bringing it to the cardstock so that I can minimize the amount of time it's touching the cardstock and minimize warping. Once we have our card all stamped, we are ready to adhere this to a white side fold card base. Simon Says Stamp has pre-cut and scored card bases. I absolutely love to use these for all of my card making. And then I'm going to finish my card with a little red heart accent. This is the only dimensional piece on my entire card, but I felt like a little red heart was just the perfect finishing touch. I'm using a little barely glue, and I'm going to just pick it up with my tweezers and pop it in place. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this one layer masked scene card using the Sunshine Flowers stamp set from the Simon Says Stamp September 2021 card kit of the same name. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Please be sure to check out the Simon Says Stamp blog for more information. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.